My name is Tansy Curtin. I'm the curator of this wonderful exhibition, which is called Bessie Davidson and Sally Smart, Two Artists and the Parisian Avant-Garde. Now, this is an exhibition that has been especially curated for Bendigo Art Gallery, and I've been working on this for quite a number of years now, and it's wonderful to see it come to fruition. Bessie Davidson's a really interesting artist. She's really sort of gone under the radar for a very long time, for far too long. She's a South Australian born artist, born in 1879 to Scottish migrant parents. And she led a very sort of middle class life in early Adelaide. But what she really did is became this amazing, courageous artist. She was a student of Rose Macpherson, as she was known then, better known as Margaret Preston today, of course. And together they travelled to Paris to experience the artistic world that was Paris in the early part of the 20th century. Now, many artists did that. It was very much a rite of passage for artists to travel to the European centres, to learn about the arts, to be involved in the Salon and the Royal Academy. But really, Bessie Davidson found her niche in that wonderful Parisian art world, and she stayed. But what's really interesting is these artists like Bessie Davidson, Margaret Preston, Dorrit Black, Grace Crowley, all these incredible women artists, modernist artists, were really engaging with an international, global art world. Very outward focus, very much looking at what was happening in the rest of the world, not just what was happening in Australia. And I think that's probably why many of their works have been forgotten over the years. But that said, Bessie Davidson received a Legion of Honour, which is the highest award conferred by the French government. She was a nurse in an infectious diseases ward of a hospital during the First World War. And she was actually on the run during the Second World War, of course, being an enemy alien at that time, and she was a part of the resistance movement. So she was an incredibly important member of society, not to mention the artistic things that she did in Paris. She exhibited at the Paris Salons, really from 1904 onwards. She was a founding member of the Salon de Tuileries. She was the secretary of the Femmes Artistes Modernes. She had her work included in this very, very important book called Quelques Femmes Peintres, which means some women painters. But I think I've known about Sally Smart's connection to Bessie Davidson for many, many years. I did an exhibition for Bendigo Art Gallery in 2007 about the whole experience of the expatriate Australian artists, and Bessie Davidson was part of that, and that's where I really started talking to Sally about this idea of why is Bessie Davidson's work not being examined. And so we've been talking about this for a number of years now, and really thought, how can we really bring Bessie Davidson's work into the 21st century, talk about her legacy, talk about the impact that she had on the lives of artists and the world around her. What better way than bringing this incredible contemporary artist who has forged a name for herself internationally, bringing her work together with her ancestor, a woman who left such an important artistic legacy for her. This exhibition presents a really rare opportunity. So many of Bessie Davidson's works are in private collections. So many have never been exhibited together. I've trawled across private collections, museums across Australia to bring these works together. 50 of Bessie Davidson's works for the first time since that 1967 exhibition. And lots of them have never ever been exhibited here in Australia. So it's a really exciting opportunity to see her works together. It's also a really great opportunity to see the intergenerational connection between Bessie Davidson and Sally Smart, the legacy that these wonderful female artists leave with our contemporary artists, and of course then the legacy that Sally Smart leaves for our younger generations of artists. It's really important to acknowledge that.
My name is Sally Smart. I'm a visual artist. I work across multiple fields of work. I'm working more increasingly cross-disciplinary, working with dancers to create artworks, video works. I work large-scale installation works, and I work across the globe. Bessie Davidson was my great-great-aunt, actually. She was my mother's grandmother's sister. And I learnt about Bessie Davidson as a young child, growing up in the Flinders Ranges, South Australia. Mum had really only 5 years before I was born been to Bessie Davidson's studio with her grandma and Davidson's sister in Paris. So by the time I was about 4, I really was really interested in Bessie Davidson because Mum had this beautiful book of all her journey and travels in Paris and on the P&O, going through the Suez Canal. And so I learnt from a really young age about Bessie Davidson. And she had a massive influence on my life because I wanted to be an artist as a little girl growing up. I was creative and I was artistic, and my family recognised that in me. And the great thing was, with that isolated upbringing, I knew, and my family knew, about a woman artist, a famous woman artist from Paris. So that is an incredible legacy for a young woman to have, a young woman who wanted to be an artist to have. So the opportunity to create work for this exhibition is incredibly meaningful and powerful for me because it's in a way, it's a long history of knowing about Bessie Davidson. So when I was invited to make, if you like, a work in response to the Bessie Davidson exhibition, I considered Bessie Davidson, of course, and I was in Paris doing research and had, of course, a long history of knowing about her work. But it was an opportunity to delve deeper into her work and to think about ideas about Davidson as an artist and the legacy not only that she had for me, but for other women artists as well and for other artists generally. And so I went to Paris, and it was on returning from Paris, maybe about 2 weeks later, I woke up one morning and I had a vision about the work that I wanted to make. And I could not consider Davidson without thinking about Preston, because Margaret Preston had always been, for me as a young artist as well, very important. I decided to make it a dance work because I've been working a little bit in video and dance more recently with my work. And I decided to base it on a work of Pina Bausch's, because I've been very interested in looking at 20th century dance, the intersection between dance and visual artists. And I decided to concentrate on Davidson and Preston's relationship. And that relationship, in a way, was about them as artists. Preston was Davidson's teacher, but probably also her lover, and they were partners, you know, for, I would say, a considerable amount of time. They knew each other definitely for 10 years. But I also wanted to make it about a partnership in art and what that might look like, and to think about that. And with this vision of the Café Muller, it was a very sort of famous scene that Pina Bausch had made at a very important time in her career, and quite an emotional embodiment of dance and visual theatre. So I had this idea of having a theatre, a big cavernous space, rather than what Bausch had done with a cafe scene, to have a big cavernous space of easels. So I had 96 easels in the end. And I used the easels as a sign for obviously art, but they could also stand in for people. They could stand in for other artists, and they could stand in for the Eiffel Tower. There was sort of a lot of sort of different symbolism that started to rise out of the easel. Why did I want contemporary dancers for this work? I wanted contemporary dancers because I wanted to bring both Davidson and Preston into the 21st century as lived bodies, if you like, to embody something about relationships, their bodies as a sort of conduit for these women who were working at that time, an incredibly powerful time in the 20th century, that time of great avant-garde movements, that time of great change for those women, and the courage that they, as young women, did have at that time in Paris. And I wanted something about that emotional intensity to come through my dancers' bodies. I was really interested to find a photograph of Davidson and Preston, and fortunately I did find one with both of them in the photograph, but there were other people in the photograph, and I wanted to make a small work, like a really intimate portrait work of the two artists together. And so I montaged the other figures out of the work and created and printed it onto satin and stretched it onto a little canvas. And so it's a really intimate small portrait of the two of them. So more recently I've dealt with my work has really concentrated a lot more on creating film work and video work, and actually having lived bodies and live bodies inside my installation work, if you like. That sort of moved towards that more. And I've actually worked now with this work for the Bendigo Art Gallery, creating the film work and installation work and also work on canvas. So I've actually, you know, there's something in every medium actually, and in every form of methodology that I'm sort of known for, I'm bringing to this exhibition.